Today we're looking at the very best decks in standard format for November 2024, and we're going to start with a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make the top 10, beginning with Bayonet EX. The most popular variant of Bayonet EX is Bayonet EX with Gardevoir EX, and we see this list here, which has taken a lot of placements, including a first place in seniors and 2 top 16s in the Master Division. Bayonet EX's Everlasting Darkness attack is very strong because it stops your opponent from playing any item cards from their hand next turn. However, it's weak in the fact that it only does 30 damage. So most of the time, you're going to need something to supplement Bayonet EX's damage output to make it worth playing, because that item lock is very strong, but eventually you're going to also have to knock out your opponent's Pokemon. Now, Poltergeist can be a good option for that. Poltergeist does 60 damage times the amount of each trainer card in your opponent's hand. But of course, if you use Poltergeist, that means you're letting them use items next turn. So you have to really be sure when you're ready to use Poltergeist that it's going to be worth it, or maybe you're just winning the game on the turn that you use Poltergeist. So the cards that supplement this Bayonet EX are going to include Gardevoir EX, Monkey Dory, and Radiant Alakazam for the most part. So of course, Gardevoir EX allows you to attach basic energy cards from your discard pile to your psychic Pokemon, and then you put damage on for each psychic energy you attached in this way. Monkey Dory has the Adrenabrain ability, which will allow you to move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So not only is this going to essentially heal that damage that you might have put on your own Pokemon with Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace, but it's also going to add damage to your opponent's Pokemon. And like I said, we're going to need ways to supplement that damage for Bayonet EX. Another cool tool that's in this deck is the Gravity Gemstone. As long as the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, the retreat cost of both active Pokemon is +1 colorless more. So that's really good for the strategy of bringing something up like, let's say, a Squawkabilly or a Lumineon, and not necessarily locking it in the active, but we hit it with Everlasting Darkness for 30 damage. We have a Gravity Gemstone up there, and we're going to try to keep it locked up there. And if you can just infinitely attack your opponent's Pokemon because of Radiant Alakazam moving damage counters around, you can lock something in the active for a pretty long time while moving damage around the board and try to set up some checkmate scenarios. Now, speaking of checkmate scenarios, the other version of Bayonet EX is Bayonet EX Dusknoir. This list was created by Henry Brand. He played it at the World Championships this past year. He did not make day 2, didn't get a great placement, unfortunately, but one of his students in the juniors division, Zelda, was able to get 2nd place at the Louisville Regionals with this Bayonet EX Dusknoir creation. Like I was saying, you need something to supplement Bayonet EX, and the choice of that in this deck list is Dusclops and Dusknoir. You're able to take care of threats by popping double Dusknoir, or you can help supplement that damage from Everlasting Darkness. Next in the honorable mentions is Gardevoir EX. So Gardevoir EX was one of the best decks for times in the past year. It's been the best deck in some formats in the past year, but it's really fallen off with the release of Stellar Crown and the introduction of new combinations of cards. The Dusknoir cards in particular have been a problem for it. The Reggie Dragovar V-Star matchup has been a big problem for it, but it's still getting placements. We see here that it got top 32, 2 top 32 placements at the Lille Regionals. And let's just see how the decks are being built. So we'll see this list here, 24th place from Lille Regionals, using Secret Box as the ace spec of choice. Secret Box is great for finding Technical Machine Evolution in the early game, or maybe even Bravery Charm or Technical Machine De-Evolution as the game goes on. The goal of this deck is going to be attacking with your really strong single prize Pokemon like Drifloon and Screamtail, thanks to Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace powering them up, putting damage counters on them, maximizing their attack's potential. And then you also have Monkey Dory with the Adrenabrain to essentially heal and add damage, but its Mind Bend attack can also be a pretty strong attack, doing 60 and confusing the opponent's Pokemon. A nice little poke of damage while confusing them, giving them something to deal with on their turn. And don't forget also, Gardevoir EX is a pretty good attacker. You're 110 health, you can heal the Psychic Embrace damages off with Adrenabrain. and you're swinging 190 a turn with a pretty large Pokemon. The next honorable mention is Pidgeot Control. So Pidgeot Control, its highest placement in Masters Division has been 16th place at the Joinville Regionals in September, but more recently 23rd place at the Lille Regionals in the Masters Division. Pidgeot Control aims to establish a Pidgeot EX on the board so that you have that quick search ability every turn. Quick search allows you to just search out any single card. And then we're going to find ways to control the game to a point where the opponent cannot win. So where most decks want to try to take a lead in prize cards, or take a whole bunch of prize cards at once, trying to win by like turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. Pidgeot Control is going to try to find more creative ways to win the game. Maybe locking something in the active with the Water Ogre Pawn's Sob attack that says the opponent can't retreat. Maybe getting rid of their resources with Eri and Misfortune Sisters and Luxray V. Or maybe walling them out, having Pokemon that their Pokemon just cannot attack, like the Mimikyu with the Safeguard ability, and then the Cornerstone Ogerpon with the Cornerstone Stance ability. Those are both really good at walling things out. A card that has been popping up more recently in control lists is the Genesect with the Ace Nullifier. That ability reads, if this Pokemon has a Pokemon tool attached to it, your opponent cannot play Ace-Spec cards from their hand. And that is specifically going to be really good at shutting down Prime Catcher, which is one of the most popular Ace specs, but it's also one of the Ace specs that are good against Pidgeot Control, because if you're trying to lock something up in the active, this Genesect stops them from using Prime Catcher to get their Pokemon out of the active. It also turns off one of their gust effects that could potentially help them knock out your Pidgeot EX or chase down your Rotom or Lumineon. So this Genesect has been seeing more play just because shutting off Prime Catcher when so many decks are playing it, and it's also a pretty good card against your control strategy, has proven to be pretty effective. And the last honorable mention is the sponsor of today's video, Alolan Clash. Alolan Clash is the new online client coming out in early 2025 for Alolan's TCG. This is going to be a desktop and mobile client featuring seamless, fully automated gameplay. What's really sick about this game is that it's going to be completely free to play. All cards, all functional cards will be unlocked for everyone from the start of the game. Now, there will be microtransactions and battle passes to keep this game going. You can buy cosmetics, but if you want to just play the game, learn the game, enjoy it, you can get on and play completely for free. So the reason why I'm talking to you about this today is because it's currently in the alpha and beta process, and there is a Kickstarter that allows you to back this to get alpha or beta access. You can get beta testing development access to this game, which will be coming out before the end of the year in beta access for just $10 or more, depending on which tier of Kickstarter you want. So for not a lot of money, you can get in and start testing this game before the year is over. And Alolan, you know, this is just for the online client. I've been enjoying the physical game of Alolan a lot. I think it's a really creative and fun game to play, and I highly suggest you checking it out today. Now, getting into our top 10, we're gonna kick it off here with number 10, Lost Zone Box. Now, Lost Zone Box basically fell out of existence. This deck was not doing well, not popular, not being talked about, not being practiced against, mostly because of the Kyurem card in Reggie Dragovar. Reggie Dragovar was super popular in the Worlds format and in Baltimore format, and for good reason. It was probably the best deck in format. It might still be one of the best decks in format, but that did not stop Michael Davidson getting second place at the Louisville Regionals with Lost Zone Box. The goal of Lost Zone Box is going to be to get 4, 7, or 10 cards into the Lost Zone, because they unlock different milestones at those numbers. At 4 cards in the Lost Zone, you can start attacking for free with Cramorant. At 7 cards in the Lost Zone, you can use Mirage Gate to accelerate energy. And at 10 cards in the Lost Zone, you can use Sableye Lost Mine attack to put 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. Now, don't think that Cramorant and Sableye are the only attackers here. Radiant Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken is a super important attack for this deck. doing 90 to 2 different Pokemon, and you're going to be using Mirage Gate to power that up, while Radiant Greninja is also used for its Concealed Cards ability to draw cards. Then we have Iron Hands EX, going to be used here for the Ampy Very Much attack to allow it to take an extra prize card. This is really good against Pokemon that are already damaged or against low HP single prize Pokemon, taking an extra prize to either get back into the prize trade or to get ahead. And then Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, which is great because it has a lot of health, and the Blood Moon attack can be used for 2, 1, maybe even 0 energy because of the ability that allows it to cost 1 less for every prize card your opponent has already taken. So you're going to be looking to play a mostly single prize Pokemon strategy with your Comfey, Sableye, Cramorant, Radiant Greninja until you need either Blood Moon or Iron Hands, and then you could start putting those 2 prizers onto the board. Number 9 is Iron Thorns. So Quad Iron Thorns actually won Worlds this year. Now we are in a different format from Worlds. We have gained Stellar Crown into the format, so there are some changes. And honestly, Iron Thorns has not been performing incredibly well in terms of how high their placements are, but a lot of people are getting into day 2s. A lot of people are earning championship points with this deck, which is definitely inflating it in the rankings and bringing it up to number 9. So we'll see here that Iron Thorns is typically played with just 4 Pokemon in the deck, just those 4 Iron Thorns. You will sometimes see Mimikyus or Cornerstone Mask Ogerpons added in to give you also a wall strategy. But I do think the best way to play the deck is likely just with this for Iron Thorns EX. Then you can just focus on tossing as many powerful trainer cards into the deck as possible. You see a lot of 4-ofs in this deck for all of those supporter cards. Then we've also got 4 Crushing Hammers and 1 Enhanced Hammer, as well as 2 Lost City. So a lot of disruption elements here. But the main part of this deck is just sticking Iron Thorns EX in the active with that initialization ability that turns off all rule box abilities except for future Pokemon, and then you just smack away for 120, 140, 160 each turn, depending on, you know, if you have a double turbo attached, if you have a future booster energy capsule attached. So you're never doing anything too flashy with this deck. You're going to just sit there, hope that shutting down your opponent's rule box abilities makes their deck stink, and then you can just hit them for mediocre damage every turn, because if they're not doing anything because their abilities are off, you're going to just be walking into the finish line essentially. So this can be a linear and boring deck to play, but with how many people are earning championship points with it, and it was able to win the world championships in a slightly different format, you know, pre-Stellar Crown, this deck does perform pretty well. Next at number 8, we've got Palkia V-Star with Dusknoir, and also notably Greninja EX. What's interesting about this deck is that it was completely legal for Worlds, but it wasn't really played at Worlds. Grafton Roll placed 9th at Baltimore, which was the same format as Worlds, but a few weeks later, and then Stefan Ivanov placed top 4 at Dortmund with Palkia V-Star Dusknoir. Then we recently had one more top 4 at Louisville. Now this Louisville is in the new Stellar Crown format, but you'll see that this does not have any Stellar Crown cards. So it's definitely an interesting one, since this deck was available previously, but hadn't really come out into the metagame yet until more recently. So the goal of this deck is going to be to start attacking on turn 2 and try to win the game either on turn 3 or turn 4. And Dusknoir allows those super early wins, because if you can do something like pop a Curse Blast and then another Curse Blast on a 2-prize Pokemon, you'll take 2 prizes. Your opponent will also take 2 prizes. From there, you're going to be at 2 prizes and your opponent at 4. So the goal is to be able to do that and then win on turn 3. So this is kind of a fast deck, but it's also very combo oriented. What with the rare candies, the Night Stretcher, the Pokestops. And also I really have to note that Greninja EX is an amazing inclusion into this archetype. Greninja EX has really high health. It has a weakness that's different to Palkia V-Star, and it's Terra type fighting, which means that it hits Pheasantipity for weakness, it hits Rotom for weakness, it hits Terapagos and Blood Moon Ursaluna for weakness. So the Greninja EX is a really, really good Pokemon for a few reasons. Next is Dragapult. So Dragapult has had a weird history in competitive Pokemon TCG this season, or this past year, I should say. Because when it first came out in Twilight Masquerade, it was deemed to be an instant, very strong archetype. Players thought that Dragapult EX was going to be the archetype to beat. We saw that that wasn't really the case at NAIC. Then for Worlds, Dragapult EX just became, okay, we're putting Dragapult EX in Reggie Dragovar. That's the best way to play this card, and it wasn't very good on its own. However, into the Stellar Crown format, we gained Sparkling Crystal and Crispin, and these two cards allowed Dragapult EX to stand on its own as a strong archetype, even when there is the choice of just tossing it into Reggie Dragovar. This is the first place list that Ryuki Okada won the Dortmund Regionals with. Notably, not really playing a support Pokemon, playing Dragapult EX and the Dusknoir line, but not playing Pidgeot, not playing Xatu. Those are two of the ways that we've seen, okay, you got to play one of these to support the deck. Here they've chosen to play 2 Rotom, Lumineon, Pheasantipede, and 1 Tatsugiri, filling out the support space of the deck with those basic Pokemon instead. Dragapult EX has one of the most efficient attacks in the game, Phantom Dive, doing 200 to the active and 6 damage on the bench wherever you like. So outputting 260 damage every turn, but with that 6 damage spread, it's really, really good. For setting up other Pokemon to be knocked out, like against Raging Bolt, for example. You put 10 on an Ogerpon, 10 on a Pheasantipede, 40 on a benched Raging Bolt, and now all of those are within the knockout range of Phantom Dive's 200. In addition, the pre-evolution Dracloak has Recon Directive, which allows you to look at the top 2 cards, put one of them into your hand, the other on the bottom of your deck. So you have a looting ability there. You have a really, really strong attack on your main Pokemon, which also, by the way, has 320 health and no weakness. And it kind of synergizes really well with the Dusknoir line, as well as, like I said, those 2 new cards, Sparkling Crystal and Crispin. Those really, really gave this deck what it needed to stand on its own. Next up at number 6 is Snorlax Stall. So Snorlax Stall, a lot of people don't like it. It's an alternate win condition deck that's trying to trap a Pokemon into the active with Snorlax's block ability, which says as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. So the whole strategy is to lock Pokemon up there into the active, things like Lumineon or Squawkabilly, Pokemon that have either no usable attacks or no good usable attacks, to just lock up there while you wait for your opponent to deck out. The other win condition this deck has is having Mimikyu and or Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon as these sort of walls. So if your opponent doesn't have Pokemon that can get through these Pokemon, because of Mimikyu's Safeguard ability, which says prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from opponent's Pokemon EX and V, and Cornerstone's ability, Cornerstone Stance, which prevents all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. If they don't have anything to get through that, you just put these Pokemon up into the active, and eventually your opponent will deck out. One neat thing to note about the 3rd place list from Leal is that they are playing this Diancie with the Diffuse Reflection attack. This attack does 40 damage for each special energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So a combination of this Diancie and some Mist Energies to use for its attack, as well as Giacomo, you might be able to squeak out some wins against Lugia thanks to this Diancie. You can take out their Archeopses with the Diffuse Reflection, or you could take out their Chinchinos and then just wall the rest of their Pokemon with Mimikyu or Cornerstone Ogerpon. Next at number 5 is Terapagos. Looking at the highest placing list from the Leal Regionals, this is Nico Alabas's 21st place list. Terapagos Dusknoir is going to be an aggressive combo-oriented deck, much like the Palkia Dusknoir deck that we spoke about earlier. What's really nice about Terapagos EX is that it's a basic Pokemon with pretty high health, and the attack that we're going to be using costs colorless energy, so you can just attack with double turbo energies, that unified beatdown attack. The bad part about it is that the damage output isn't that great, so you really do need the Area Zero Underdepth Stadium to expand your bench, and Dusk Noir to make up for that damage output. And also the other bad thing is that it can't use this attack on your first turn going second. But since Terapagos is a Terra Pokemon, that unlocks the usability of Noctowl. So Noctowl is going to be the main way that we're searching out cards in this deck with the Jewel Seeker ability. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, if you have any Terra Pokemon in play, you may search your deck for up to 2 trainer cards and put them into your hand. So this is a really, really strong effect, of course, because it's requiring you to evolve into Noctowl, and it's requiring you to have a Terra Pokemon in play to balance that out. But regardless, this is a really, really strong effect. Any 2 trainer cards, so that includes supporters, items, tools, stadiums, what have you. So yeah, the goal for this deck is going to be to try to win the game on turn 3. Take either 2 or 4 prizes on turn 2, and then take either 2 or 4 prizes on turn 3. And then, you know, at worst, trying to win by turn 4, just taking 2 prize, 2 prize, 2 prize on turns 2, 3, and 4. And of course, the Dusknoir allows you to do that with the Cursed Blast. Like I was talking about with the Palkia deck, if you're able to go Curse Blast, use that damage to knock out a 2-prizer, that's 2 prizes there, and then use Terapagos to knock out another 2-prizer, that's 4 prizes, and then you can clean up pretty easily with Blood Moon Ursaluna, since it does 240 damage, and by that time your opponent will probably only have 2 prizes remaining if you gave them 2 with Dusknoir and 2 by them knocking out the Terapagos. Number 4 is Lugia Archeops, and Lugia Archeops has been absolutely destroying this format. Even though it's only number 4, it's been incredibly successful. Second place at Dortmund, first place at Joinville, 2 top 8s at Louisville, and then 2 more top 8s at Lille. So why don't we check out the highest placing list from Lille, since that was the most recent. We have Joshua from Zapdos TCG's list here. And Joshua has actually used this list at Dortmund and Lille, and also for a top 32 at Worlds a couple of months ago. So Joshua has been playing Lugia for a while now, and playing the same exact list for a while now, actually. It's a pretty simple list. He's playing a 3-3 line of Cinccino, so you can make sure you get the most out of using that attack multiple times a game if you're using that 3-3 line. And something I've been saying for a while now is that this Cinccino special role has the potential to be the strongest single prizer attacker in the game. The issue, of course, is just that you have to use it surrounded by all of these 2 prize Pokemon. So Lugia on turn 2, you're going to try to get that Summoning Star ability to pop 2 Archeopses from the discard onto the bench, and then from there you're set as long as your opponent can't quickly knock out your Archeopses. Before we get into the top 3, I would like to remind you that I released my complete competitive Pokemon TCG Masterclass over on Metafy. It's over 5 hours of video content with article content and PDFs in addition to learn everything you need to know about being a competitive Pokemon TCG player. If this is something you might be interested in, if you're looking to take your game to the next level, I'm positive that this course has everything you need to know to start day 2ing events, winning money, getting championship points, working towards a Worlds invite. So check out the link for that in the description down below. And next we're going into number 3, which is Charizard EX. I also want to note, while we're getting into Charizard EX here, that the metagame is very diverse, and most of the decks we're talking about today have the potential to top 8 or even win events. So the strength between these decks, sometimes the strength doesn't vary that much. So like Lugia, even though it's in 4th place, it's a really, really good deck. Even though Terapagos and Snorlax are in 5th and 6th place, they're still really good decks. But now we are getting into the top 3 here with Charizard. So Charizard, let's look at the 19th place list from Lille Regionals. So Charizard, of course, is a 330 HP Pokemon with the ability that powers itself up and an attack that gets stronger as the game goes on. Charizard EX is one of the strongest single cards ever printed, based off of all of those attributes: the HP, the ability that powers itself up, the attack that grows as the game goes on, even the Terra tag that protects it from damage on the bench. Overall, an incredibly powerful card that's always going to be a meta contender as long as it's in the format. And then Charizard has support from Pidgeot EX with the quick search, which is just an insanely powerful card because it lets you search for any card once a turn. And then this is going to be supported by the Dusclops and Dusknoir, which work really well with Charizard because you're letting your opponent take a prize, which means your Burning Darkness gets stronger. It also means that your Counter Catcher can be activated, your Roxanne can be activated, your Defiance Band can be activated. So this deck has a lot of things that get better as your opponent takes more prizes. So the Dusclops Dusknoir line just fits really naturally into the Charizard Pidgeot archetype. This is a little bit of a tricky archetype to play because although Charizard is so powerful, you do need to maneuver some matchups carefully to stay ahead on the prize trade. That means, you know, presenting a single prize board or weaving in Radiant Charizard as an attacker or using Toro or Thornton to remove your Rotoms and Luminions, remove those liabilities from the board. And knowing exactly when to evolve into Charizard and start the offense, knowing when to pop your Dusclops and Dusknoirs. So this is a strong deck with a pretty simple Pokemon lineup that still gives you a good bit of options, especially with all of the supporter options you have to work with and with Pidgeot's quick search that allows you to search out any card you want every turn. Next at number 2 is Reggie Drago V-Star, and James Cox just won the Lille Regionals with this, and this list, actually, this specific list has been on a tear this format, getting a whole lot of placements. And I wouldn't be surprised if James puts out a comprehensive guide to this deck on his YouTube channel. So we'll either show James's YouTube channel on the screen or put it in the description or something real quick. But he's a friend, great player, great content creator. So look out for some sort of Reggie Drago content from him, especially since he just won this regionals. But let's talk about Reggie Drago V-Star. So Reggie Drago V-Star is a really interesting card because for most of its life cycle in standard format, it was either an underplayed or not played at all, kind of like a rogue deck. And it's mostly because its attack is awkward to fulfill, but Teal Mask Ogerpon EX and Energy Switch pretty much takes care of that. That makes Apex Dragon a pretty easy attack to fulfill the energy costs for. And then Apex Dragon, what it does is you can choose a dragon type Pokemon in your discard pile and copy one of their attacks. So you know, we've really gotten this archetype narrowed down to just a few attacks that it really needs to be using. So we have, of course, Reggie Drago V's Dragon Laser, which is hardly ever going to be the attack we want to use. Phantom Dive from Dragapult, which is the most frequently used attack. Then Giratina V-Star's Lost Impact that can do 280, and Kyurem's Trifrost, of course, which can do 110 to 3 Pokemon, but has to discard all energies attached. So Reggie Drago V-Star is going to be a deck that's trying to win the game, typically by turn 4 or 5. You know, start attacking turn 2 and take 2 prizes each turn. Sometimes it can take a little longer than that, and sometimes you can make some multi-knockout turns happen between the Phantom Dive damage spread and the Kyurem's Trifrost. In addition, you've got Radiant Charizard here as a single prize attacker to weave in case you don't start off with winning the prize trade against decks like Raging Bolt. And then the neat inclusion we've got here from Stellar Crown is that it plays Noctowl with Jewel Seeker. So this is a combo-oriented deck at times, and Jewel Seeker can search out any 2 trainer cards, so that could be very, very strong. Of course, I would be remiss not to include that Reggie Drago V-Star as a deck and a card is partially so powerful because of that Legacy Star V-Star power, which lets you mill the top 7 cards of your deck and put any 2 cards back into your hand. So if there's any one tip that I can give you about playing Reggie Drago V-Star, it's that hold on to that Legacy Star power until you absolutely need it, because it can be really clutch to just pick the final 2 cards you need to win the game out of your discard pile. And finally, the number 1 performing deck, according to Limitless TCG, which is what I've used to make this top 10 list today, is Raging Bolt, up at number 1. So Raging Bolt actually was able to win the Louisville Regionals piloted by Caleb Gedimer. And this started the trend of playing 3 Bravery Charms, sometimes even 4 Bravery Charms in Raging Bolt nowadays. So the Raging Bolt deck is one of the most simplest, low to the ground, fast, aggressive decks you can play in current Pokemon TCG. Raging Bolt has really high health, and then with a Bravery Charm, we boost that health all the way up to 290. Similarly, Teal Mask Ogerpon and Pheasantipity will sometimes be the lowest HP 2 prizers you have on your board, and Bravery Charm brings them both up to 260 health. So you have a lot of HP to work with on these basic Pokemon, and we haven't even talked about the damage output. Raging Bolt EX can essentially do infinite damage. Bellowing Thunder does 70 damage for each basic energy card you discard from your board. So typically it's very, very easy to get 4 or 5 energy on the board. You do a couple Teal Dance, you do an energy attachment, you use a Professor Sada's to get some energies on the board, and you're good to go to swing 280 or 350, whichever one you need. So fast deck, aggressive deck, just trying to end the game as quickly as possible, taking 2 prizes every turn if possible, and you know, you're doing it with a very healthy Pokemon that's not incredibly easy to knock out back. So although it can be very linear and straightforward, it doesn't mean that your opponent's going to be able to play around the raw power of Raging Bolt Ogerpon. That's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for watching November's best decks in the Pokemon TCG. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content, and look out for more Pokemon TCG content always coming out here on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.